afternoon, everybody. In 1942, sci-fi writer Robert Heinlein, writing as Anson MacDonald, published a story called Waldo. In it, an inventor named Waldo Farthingwaite Jones invents a device called the Waldo F. Jones Synchronous Reduplicating Pantograph, often just referred to as a Waldo for short. And the Waldo was essentially a robotic arm that was controlled not by a computer, but by a human operator. Now, part of Heinlein's vision became a reality in the 1950s as humanity had to learn to deal with radioactive and dangerous materials. But there's another aspect of the Waldo that Heinlein wrote about that is less talked about, but which inspired two other scientists years later. And this was the ability of the Waldo to actually create smaller versions of itself at smaller and smaller scale until a human operator was able to interact with individual cells. And it was sci-fi, but it inspired Richard Feynman, who in his famous talk, There's Plenty of Room at the Bottom, was the first to envision what we would refer to as nanotechnology later down the line. And he laid out exactly how science could progress from progress to nanotechnology from 1959 to the year 2000. And in the 1970s, after Watson and Crick worked out the structure of DNA and the molecular machinery inside of cells was better understood, K. Eric Drexler refined these ideas, developed them while at MIT, and officially kicked off the nanotechnology craze in the late 80s with his book, Engines of Creation. This is a powerful concept, something that Feynman referred to as being able to synthesize anything, and Drexler called complete control of the structure of matter. 50 years after Heinlein and 30 years after There's Plenty of Room at the Bottom, in the late 80s and early 90s, nanotechnology seemed less like science fiction and more like science fact just around the corner. Or at least it did to me in 1992 when, as a 14-year-old, I inhaled my copy of Engines of Creation and did an extensive presentation on it for my school biology class. 30 years later, in 2022, what of this bold vision of nanotechnology have we achieved? Well, Moore's Law has definitely given us miniaturization in the electromechanical world, sure, but much like the Jetsons' flying car of 1962, complete control of the structure of matter feels farther off today, or just as far off today as it did in 1992. So what happened to nanotechnology? Is it gone? And what can we learn about it that's relevant to us in the Internet of Things space? What fate awaits us in the IoT that nanotechnology can predict? So let's talk about the IoT and its own brush with hype over the last several years. And in the last 40 years, cycles of innovation have led to the personal computer, internet, cloud, and mobile as the world has become more connected, more integrated. And as technology has become more pervasive, it's gotten smaller and cheaper. So the Internet of Things, which has been nascent since the 80s and officially a going concern since named in the 90s, has ridden on the back of this wave over the last decade. The IoT experienced its own hype train debut in 2011 when it first appeared on Gartner's hype cycle for emerging technology, and Cisco predicted 50 billion connected devices by the year 2020. In 2016, on the heels of SoftBank's acquisition of ARM, CEO Masayoshi Son predicted a Cambrian explosion of IoT devices into the trillions within the next 20 years. And yet, after spending 8 years on the Gartner hype cycle, IoT was dropped and fragmented among other reports in 2019 with nary an explanation, and after progressing no further than the peak of inflated expectations. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, that's the it's going to get worse before it gets better part of the emerging technology life cycle. And so instead of 50 billion devices in 2020, we got to somewhere between 10 and 20 billion, depending on whose counts you're paying attention to. According to some intrepid prognosticators, we're still more than a few years away from even getting to that 50 billion devices. So why does it seem like the golden era of IoT is no closer than when we started? Why does it feel like our projections of billions and trillions of devices keeps being shifted another year into the future as every year passes? Why does the term and Twitter account Internet of Shit continue to resonate, even as we beat the starry-eyed drum of future connections and future profits? Is it time we just asked ourselves if we're chasing an impractical dream, pack it all up and be done? Or is it time that we look within ourselves and find out where we've stuffed too much into this box in this space and slowed people down? Because should we really expect this space to thrive when it takes anywhere from 2 to 5 years for a project to reach the finish line, and 75% of projects take twice as long as planned? Maybe we can take a moment, assess, regroup, and ask ourselves if we've been going about this IoT thing all wrong. If we made a few early missteps, critical missteps that put us in this situation, and if it's not too late to take a new approach. Now, I believe really strongly that the promise of the IoT lies ahead still, and that the bumps we've experienced along this road are not due to a vision gone wrong, but a set of stumbling blocks that we've baked into the IoT in the early days and are still struggling to unwind. Some of those stumbling blocks are just things that were the state of the art when we started and are limitations now. Some of those things are things that have become painful as the industry has evolved and others have become stagnant. And some are due to just plain old inertia, things that are the way they are because they've always been that way. But no matter the cause, we have to go faster. We have to do better as an industry, or the opportunity before us will die. Not with a bang, but a whimper. And 30 years from now, someone else might be standing on this stage or another like it, talking about some other new cutting edge technology and ask, whatever happened to the Internet of Things? So let's talk about what we're doing to slow each other down at this point in the industry. And if I could choose one word to sum up all that ails the IoT, it would be complexity. It's a word we use a lot around Blues, and it's a word that our CEO shared some thoughts on many, many years ago. Complexity kills. Boy, are we awash with complexity in the IoT space. And much of it is perpetuated by those of us that are vendors that are building tools, services, and platforms designed to help those building IoT solutions. And although we are well-intentioned and we have a desire to speed our customers up and yes, reap a profit along the way, I think we unintentionally slow our customers down with a number of the decisions that we make and the things that we build. So I'm going to talk about several of these, starting with how I think we look at and talk about wireless communications technologies, or what I like to refer to as the rat wars. So there are a bevy of wireless communication protocols, or radio access technologies, or RATs, in our space. There's Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cellular, LoRa, Sigfox, Zigbee, Z-Wave, Matter, you name it, right? And even within each of those, there's more subdivision, like in cellular, where we have GSM, GPRS, CBRS, LTE, NB-IoT, Cat-M, Cat-1, 5G, and more, and many more to come, I'm sure. There's nothing inherently wrong with having so many wireless connectivity options, and each of these has their strengths and particular features that make them very appealing when solution builders are evaluating solutions. In fact, from a customer point of view, this healthy number of options can be a strength, and it's a signal that no matter what you are trying to connect as a developer and where, there's an option in the wireless space that will work for you. But we vendors often turn this bevy of options into the rat wars in terms of how we talk about these technologies and how we evangelize them to our customers, right? Because a second order effect of this specialization is that it creates a perception of competition with every connectivity support that you didn't, or every connectivity option that you didn't choose to support. So suddenly a customer that's evaluating 2 other technologies that you don't support is an opportunity at risk. Every vendor pushing another approach is a threat. Every provider using a technology outside of the boundaries defined by your standards body or alliance is a bad actor. And so we write think pieces that we publish as white papers and blog posts on our own sites. And these are, on the whole, an even-handed assessment of various wireless technologies, but where we kind of put our thumb on the scale just a little bit to make our approach look like the most favorable one, where we kind of steer customers in our direction. And instead of getting clear guidance about the pros and cons of different technologies so a customer can select the best solution for the unique conditions defined by their use case, customers have to wade through our propaganda to figure out their options. And it slows them down. Now, for those of us who make hardware, blues included. Our fixation with that hardware is another example of how we unintentionally slow our customers down. And the culprit here is the humble developer kit. Because in our space, a customer's finished product is very often a designed and built custom solution. It's something that's on a custom PCB with a surface mount or common connector attached sensors and some IP-rated or stock custom enclosure. But because every IoT solution is a combination of what you're sensing or actuating, how often, how it's connected to the internet, where it goes, how it's powered, and how many you need, it's rarely practical for vendors to build and sell a soup-to-nuts finished solution. And so, in a well-intentioned effort to genericize, we produce and sell dev kits. Everything you need to evaluate a vendor offering without having to do any of the design work. Then once you're done and you built your POC, you can use that module in your custom design. The problem is that we're fixated on the hardware. So we splash high-resolution photos of our kits across our websites, and we sell them like a solution only bounded by a customer's imagination. But then when a customer comes to look at what we're selling, our conversation with them usually goes like this, right? They have a solution in mind, and we're offering a very generic problem or very generic solution. And as vendors working in a hardware-dominated space, it's very easy for us to get fixated on the cool boards and kits that we create, the amazing-looking PCBs with a black solder mask and all that great stuff, and to build generic offerings that can be used to build a POC or evaluate our offerings against any problem. But the problem is that most customers are not looking to buy another dev kit. They're looking for a solution. Doesn't need to be a canned package solution, but just getting the kit and being told to use your imagination more often than not means that the kit ends up on a desk before it ends up in a pile, before it ends up on a shelf. The customer may get to that POC eventually, but there's nothing that we're doing to be generic that's ultimately getting them there faster. Another problem that I've seen many times is our tendency to put guardrails around developers. And in an effort to make things simple and straightforward, we introduce constraints. For example, in exchange for features like fleet management and over-the-air firmware device updates, we often ask customers to take the MCU, the programming language, and the approach that we've laid out for them. So we ask developers to look at our solution like a black box for connectivity and adapt to our way of operating rather than understanding and adapting to their needs. So they learn the programming language that we send, the MCU that we have, and all of these things, guardrails that we put in front of them, and it slows them down. And then there's the way we think about the cloud and the Internet of Things. And it's true that you need the Internet for the Internet of Things, but it often feels like the things are secondary and the Internet itself is first. And this is especially true when dealing with a lot of the hyperscaler cloud vendors out there, because they tend to treat devices, IoT devices, as just another socket. And they don't care about you getting your device online as long as it gets online and points at their services. So we end up with incomplete, largely not IoT targeted offerings, and we have to do crazy things like embed keys in our firmware in order to actually connect our devices to cloud applications. Finally, standards. Standards are great if only there weren't so many of them, right? And as with everything else on this list, our desire to create standards is often well-intentioned and at first customer-focused, right? We want to interoperate and allow our customers to know that if they take their business elsewhere, some familiar things will remain. This will largely still work. But there are two second-order effects to standards creation that can be very easy to slip into. The first is when a standards body becomes a cabal, when it operates not as a promoter of interoperability and evolution, but as a gatekeeper, as a collective motivated not by customers, but by its own interests, in finding and snuffing out novel or innovative applications of technology that occur outside of its boundaries or without its blessing. The second is when we decide that a standard is lacking and we opt to create a new one, or when we fork a repo. And again, this is usually well-intentioned, but there's a good example of this in the peripherals space. In 2010, Grove introduced the Grove connector, right? This is a very simple JST that then spawned an entire ecosystem of additional peripherals that work within this connector. But the problem is that as our boards and projects have gotten smaller, that Grove JST starts to look pretty beefy. So other vendors like SparkFun and Adafruit introduced their own variant using a smaller JST. SparkFun calls theirs Quick, and Adafruit calls theirs Stemma QT. Two different names, same connector, so are they compatible? Kind of. They are, but they aren't. There are actually boards and use cases where these two connectors are not compatible. And again, even though this was a well-intentioned effort to create standards that developers could use and rely on to interoperate, and there is some interoperability between these devices, the edge cases are enough to add more complexity for us as developers. And again, it slows us down. Now, it may feel like this point that I'm just leading you through a doom and gloom diatribe of the IoT space, but we're not growing as fast as we thought we would, so we should be honest with each other, with ourselves as an industry about why. But it doesn't end here. It doesn't end with blame and finger pointing, because this isn't about fault as much as finding opportunity to speed up, finding the promise in the things that we can do to work more closely with developers and help them move faster. And so I want to provide a couple of different perspectives on how we look at these things at Blues and how we try to speed developers up. So first, we have to end the rat wars. Right, as vendors, we need to see ourselves first and foremost as wireless enablers instead of just fixating on the subset of technologies that we have chosen to focus on. And we need to stop putting our thumb on the scale, but really find the best opportunities to connect our solution with the right customers. Now, does this mean that we may have potential customers that leave because what we sell isn't a right fit? Possibly. But again, this is about what is right for the customer and the best solution for their use case, and there's plenty of other vendors that we can build partnerships and work with to really move in that direction. Now at Blues, our focus is low power cellular IoT. This is something that would have been seen as a misnomer just a few years ago, but we saw an opportunity to serve this part of the market, and we are really good at it. If you're building an IoT solution that needs to run on a battery and connect to an LTE-M, Cat1, or Cat-M, or Cat1 or NB-IoT network, we are a great option, and we have support in over 139 countries. We know where we're strong and where it makes sense for us to let the strengths of others shine. So our products, the Note Card and NoteHub.io cloud service, are a device-to-cloud data pump. It's something that you can use to get data from your sensing and actuating devices securely to your cloud apps and back again. But we're not an end-all be-all platform. We're an enabler so that you can get your data into services like DataCake, UbiDots, Losant, and others, and really use those products where they shine while working with us where we shine. Second, we need to focus on customer pain and stop getting caught up in solutionism. We need to stop fixating on the two extremes of generic dev kits or gold-plated devices, and instead give our customers something to actually get started with. Something that's just recognizable enough for them to see their problem in. Hardware, samples, examples, content. Ultimately, a signal that we've thought about the problem and we have some ideas to help them start building their solution. Now, at Blues, we've started a journey of accelerating our customers with use case targeted reference designs that are meant to enable developers to build low-code IoT solutions. These aren't finished products, but they're reference apps that are designed to operate around our core and help customers solve a problem. One example that's relevant to this group is Sparrow. Now, Sparrow is a developer toolkit that we created at Blues to help our customers prototype device cluster applications with LoRa and then use the Note Card for cellular backhaul. We have this in our booth if you want to come and check it out. The core of Sparrow is a small board that's built around a LoRa SIP from ST Microelectronics, and which can operate either as a sensing device or a gateway if it's plugged into the Note Card. Now, we think LoRa is great for device cluster applications and use cases where the sensing device, like a smoke detector or a dispenser, is low cost, and the idea of adding a $20 plus cellular or Wi-Fi radio just isn't reasonable. But this isn't about extending the Blues core into LoRa. Rather, it's about supporting customers that are exploring wireless solutions of all types. And so we have support for and connecting examples of our Sparrow boards into LoRaWAN gateways like the Things Network, and you can come check this out at our booth as well. Now, as I mentioned earlier, guardrails are well-intentioned, but they tend to cut off choice in areas where developers most need that choice in order to move fast. We believe it's possible to preserve customer choice and flexibility with sensible defaults and features that work within that flexibility. Now, at Blues, one of the best examples is the low-power nature of the Note Card, and it's actually something that our customers tend to be surprised and delighted by. The Note Card itself is not a dumb device with an M.2 connector that you send AT commands directly to the modem. It's actually the culmination of 10 years worth of hard-fought experience building real-world, battery-powered IoT solutions. The brains of the note card on the device are actually an STM32 chip, and it is 100% JSON commands to and from the device to actually talk to it. And it handles all of the work of connecting to cellular, GPS, GNSS networks, and it runs about 8 microamps when idle. So we think that's a very important, sensible default. And because the note card is focused on being a device-to-cloud data pump and uses JSON for communications, you can use it with any microcontroller or any single board computer and any programming language that can write and read strings. And rather than viewing each device as a dumb socket and random IP address in a cloud service, we believe it's important to design hardware that interoperates with and not for the cloud. Rather than designing cloud solutions and cramming IoT devices into them as a new revenue channel, we believe that the device and cloud relationship should be symbiotic, each contributing to the other and both part of a true edge-to-cloud solution. And for Blues, this means that the note card and our NoteHub.io cloud service are meant to operate as one, a true device-to-cloud data pump of devices that know where to go when they come online, and a cloud service that exists as an extension of those devices without needing to grow to become an all-encompassing platform. Security is a sensible default of the device, and it has keys baked in the device at the point of manufacture so that when the device comes online, it knows where to go, and it uses secure off-the-internet communication over our networks. Finally, we need to break out of the black box solutions and focus on tools and services that can accelerate developers where they most need help. Rather than trying to build finished, gold-plated, no-code solutions, developers need a low-code approach, something that takes care of the messy parts of the IoT so that they can focus on their sensors, their problems, their solution. And there's a lot of messy parts in the IoT, so there's plenty of opportunity for us to help without going too far. Now, one of those messy parts is in wireless communication, and I've already shared how the note card's JSON-based approach is vastly superior to having to learn and understand AT command dialects of whatever modem that you're choosing. But another area where we think developers really need help, and I know I do, is in the realm of over-the-air firmware updates, where developers are often forced to choose between a vendor-driven approach that leaves little choice, or a hands-on approach where a cloud service delivers a binary, but the developer does all the work of updating the firmware on the device itself. And at Blues, we're working on a third way, which we call outboard DFU. We use the word outboard here like an outboard motor on a boat. Outboard DFU is a capability that we've recently released in beta and which provides the benefit of being able to use the Note Hub for hosting and delivering binaries while allowing the Note card to serve as the outboard motor, controlling the DFU process so that you don't have to litter your app code with a bunch of DFU-aware code and functionality. And the best part of this is that we do this all while giving you the same choice of MCU, whether it's an STM32, ESP32, or Nordic NRF250. So you don't just have to take a board that we deliver to you. And regardless of the embedded language or RTOS that you choose, you can deploy your pilot with CircuitPython or Arduino and move to C, C++, and an RTOS later on down the line. Because it's about the developer here. It's about whatever helps you, the developer, move fastest, so it's your choice. Now, these are just a few principles and things that we believe in at Blues. They're not comprehensive by any stretch, but our thoughts about ways that we can help accelerate developers building IoT solutions and reach the promise of the IoT. Now, I started this session today talking about nanotechnology and the hype-filled intro that it had in the late 80s. And I'm guessing that if you remember that time, you probably haven't given nanotechnology much thought in the last 30 years. So I ask again, what happened to it? After all that hype, did the opportunity just die out after the craze subsided? As it turns out, no. Instead, people got to work. Unencumbered by headlines and sci-fi prognostication, people interested and invested in the space kept researching and building. They cast off the grand narratives about swarms of nanobots protecting humanity from any and all disease and sickness and found practical applications and principles of its principles in machinery, material science, and biotechnology. One example, messenger ribonucleic acid, or mRNA, a scientific breakthrough that enabled the first COVID-19 vaccines to be ready for testing within 1 month after the gene was first sequenced. A breakthrough enabled by nanotechnology without all the hype. And this is where we are today in the IoT. The hype is starting to subside. We're not hitting those glorious projections that we thought we would, so people are losing interest. Others will tend to walk away. But if we that are here, that are still invested in this space, don't want this space to be an afterthought and to die off like so many of the other hype-filled technologies that really did go away, we have to speed up. Those of us who stick around, we have to speed up. Speed up each other, speed up developers. We need to speed up ourselves, speed up people building real-world connected applications. It's going to take a laser focus on simplicity and how we really, truly help our customers. But if we do it, our best days lie ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brandon.